Morning everyone, it's Mikki here. You are listening to another bonus episode of Mikkipedia. This time I am talking to my mate, Professor Grant Schofield, who has been on the podcast twice already. In fact, he was my very first interview, and I am fortunate enough that he has joined me at the Sports Medicine Conference here on the Big Island. Not that he's going, because he's just bunking off. However, we take the opportunity to chat about his athlete, Matt Kerr, who is definitely an up-and-coming age grouper who did. Grant talks about it in our conversation. I believe 8:24 or 8:27 at Ironman, took out the age group race there in New Zealand, and now he's here to see what he can do on the world stage. So look, those of you who know Grant know his nutrition philosophy isn't mainstream, and we talk about the nutrition protocol that he's used with Matt, and Matt has done over the last few years to really help develop his metabolic efficiency and his ability to go longer and go faster. So we really do a deep dive and we talk all of the diet and nutrition strategy stuff. We also talk about what Grant did to get himself in shape to run with me on the island. And so we kick off with that actually, and that's a super fun conversation. The Schofield protocol, we will call that. Not that either Grant or I are endorsing that at this stage. We rounded off with basically a little bit of Grant's philosophy on what it takes to be a high performer and have a high performing life, you know, and if I appreciate so much of what Grant has to say on a number of topics, and particularly in his mindset around not just performing and training, but just actually in life in general. I always get a lot from chatting to Grant about that. And essentially, it's like you're sitting down as a fly on the wall, listening to the things that we talk about every day. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation that I have with Professor Grant Schofield.
No, I think it's fine.
Okay, that's cool. Professor Schofield?
Mikki Williden, hello.
Hello. Do you know, I think it's been almost... So you've been on my podcast twice before.
And this is my third time.
This is your third time around the same time. Because I had you were my very first interview. Then you came on about a year ago, and I recently actually had some feedback on your podcast interview, the mandates one. Someone was just going through them and went, came across that Grant Schofield interview. That was great.
Right, and we've moved on though from that though, because we're done with COVID and we're in a brave new world. And
not only are we in a brave new world, we're in Hawaii.
Yeah, we're in Kona. This is race week.
Yep.
Of the Ironman Triathlon World Championships, and it's an event that I was last here for to race myself 25 years ago.
Amazing.
And I'm so pumped to be in this atmosphere and really lapping it up.
I was chatting to my mate Rob Dallymore, who I spoke to a couple of days ago actually, and just said that Grant will absolutely be living his best life.
Yeah, I'm absolutely fizzing.
Yeah.
It's been so interesting since I've been in Hawaii. We did a 2-week training camp in Maui.
Yeah.
With some athletes before this as well. So I've been sleeping well.
Yeah.
I've been getting up early. I'm not normally a morning person. I've been exercising myself. I've just been absolutely fizzing. It's amazing. It feels so good. So energized. And yeah, it's just...
Do you know, so Grant, we went for a run this morning and it was great. And what made me a couple of things made me laugh. One was 2 or 3 months ago, we were talking about running together in Hawaii, and you said, I better get fit for it.
Yeah.
And for me to subsequently find you did in fact get fit for it.
Yeah.
And went on a bit of a regime in order to get yourself fit to run with me. And I would love to...
You still dropped me though.
Yeah, true. Yeah, but that was... If I would say... No, I'm not going to say that was always going to happen, because that's not true. But, you know, age and stage.
Yeah, that was always going to happen.
Yeah.
So I think the interesting thing, I was through the whole COVID thing for the first 2 years of it, I was an absolute weapon. I was training, my eating was great. And then the last 6 months of that 2.5 years, just to show everyone out there that even the people who live this stuff day to day, I really lost my way. I was working a lot from home and found the refrigerator early. I found it late. Found it in the middle of the day as well. So I was finding it a lot. And the incidental activity that I would often accumulate as well wasn't there. And I put on a reasonable amount of weight.
Yeah.
And I guess this trip and having to run with you motivated me, but also just the fact that I'm a bit tight, and I was actually going to have to go and buy new clothes, like new underwear and stuff, which seemed a bit wrong.
Yeah.
So I felt I needed to get down from, I'd crept up to 93 kilos, and I thought I'd get back down to more of my race weight of 83, which I managed to do.
Yeah, your usual. So we were running this morning, and when you told me that, I just couldn't even believe it, actually, just because your physique was exactly the Grant Schofield that I remembered from the years, because we used to run together all of the time.
Yeah, back when I could smash you.
Yeah,
So I needed to get down. I'm not sure if you agree with my approach, but I did take some of your protein sparing things. But I went for my regime was this. It was a couple of weeks of just preparing myself mentally.
Yeah. What did that look like?
Just thinking about things and realizing that I was, I'm a real fan of the choose your hard bit.
Yes.
I'd rather go hard than easy. I'd rather have big, fast, heavy changes in diet rather than small changes.
Yeah.
And so I did a week of 3 meals a day, keto, no snack, no alcohol.
Yeah.
Just to get me in the groove. Then I cracked into a 5-day water-only fast.
Yeah.
And I usually do one of those a year anyway, so it was more for immune function and well-being.
Yeah.
And then I finished with that, and I thought, okay, I'm interested in carnivore at the moment, so I went carnivore for the rest of that month, which was 3 weeks.
Yeah. So was your carnivore just meat, or was it eggs as well?
Meat, eggs.
Yeah.
Cheese.
Yeah.
Fish.
Yeah. Nice.
Butter.
Yeah.
Salt.
Yeah, cool.
I felt amazingly good, actually, and the weight was really coming off really rapidly.
Yeah.
And then at the end of that month, I transitioned into a Precure 3-week program, which is more of a sort of health eating behavioural one, so lowish carb, whole food, and no alcohol. And so over that 2-month period, I managed to drop 10 kilos off, got back to fit all my clothes.
Amazing.
Which was a real relief.
Yeah.
And whipped into shape. And even when you dropped me this morning, I started to have some negative thoughts. I was like, you really do suck, and Mikki's thrashing. And then I was like, hey, hang on.
Cool.
You're living your best life here, and you got in shape for this, and you're in Kona. And so we're heading up a hill then, so I just went even harder.
Yeah, nice.
Burnt the only match I had left, and then you disappeared on me. But yeah, it was great. So it's been a good journey for that. I've probably done this twice before in my life. Somehow I'm usually pretty good with weight and health and stuff. It's what I live. But a couple of other times in my life, I've just lost track of it for various reasons, and I've needed that hard reset. And that might not be everyone's cup of tea, but it certainly has worked for me in the past. And I expect I should be at this weight now for at least the next few years.
Well, I think when I met you, actually, Grant, you were at the cusp of making a similar change.
Yeah, I was blaming that, and I think that's probably almost 20 years ago now. Just to put that in context, I was suffering post-birth weight gain.
That's right.
Even though I wasn't a woman.
That's right. Yeah. Because that was actually because Danny had just been born.
Yeah, Sam, my oldest one, and Jackson. Yeah, so and Danny's who's 12. So no, they'd been born, and I don't know. It's just that rapid change in lifestyle. I've been used to just doing whatever the hell I wanted when I wanted. And I think anyone who's had a new family, this is 20 years ago for me now, so you'll know that becomes much more difficult, and life's not about you so much anymore, which is a good thing. But
just change. Interesting what you say about that hard and fast reset, because just a couple of things come to mind. One is that people mistake the sort of sustainability of weight loss in that they think that if you do something hard and fast, then it's impossible to sustain. And that's actually not been borne out in literature. It's actually just one of those things that people believe, like, oh, the faster you lose it, the quicker you'll put it back, the more unsustainable that approach is going to be. Whereas actually a lot of people respond really well and are really motivated by those resets and by the quick changes, because the win that they get is enough to spur motivation that then turns to actual behavior change.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think it depends on the person, but one thing that's really stuck in my mind for years now is when I was supervising Dr. Cliff Harvey, who's really a guru in this nutrition space, much more so than me. He was doing some keto adaptation, keto flu studies with mainly women in this little trial. And somebody talked him into doing some focus groups, some qualitative work, which he now swears he'll never do again.
Yeah.
But I helped him with that. And I just recall a couple of things with the sustainability. We had interviewed one woman who really had no symptoms with keto. She did okay on it, felt okay, felt a bit better than before. And we said, "You're going to go on with it?" And she was like, "Meh, well, I don't know." And another woman who had just terrible symptoms, horrific. In fact, we were appalled that she didn't contact us or pull out of the study.
Yeah.
She had a couple of preschool children. She was basically bedridden for a weekend where her two kids were just running on the loose around the house. She felt terrible. She eventually came through that keto flu and rebounded and felt pretty good.
Yeah.
I said, "Do you think you'll carry on with this strategy?" We said, "Oh, hell yeah, for the effort I've put in, there's no way I'm going to give up now."
Yeah.
And so I don't know about that sort of choose your hard stuff. If that, for some people, actually helps them with sustainability.
Yeah.
I also remember there's another doctoral student of mine, Lucy Hone, who's really well-being and mental health expert now, a real hero in that space. And I just remember one time talking to her, she goes, "It's taken me so much effort to get into shape over the last 3 months. There's no way I'm letting this go." The pain of it almost made it more likely she was going to carry on.
Yeah.
It's an interesting idea. And I think it would be really good to investigate that more and who that applies to. Maybe it's different personality types, and maybe some people are much better with small, subtle changes and a consistent approach.
Yeah.
And some people are better off just going hard. And we just don't know enough about that personalization yet.
Yeah, it's interesting because the more uncomfortable you feel, if we think about stress in the body and the brain, like I wonder if there's more changes in the brain that occur with the more with the high level of discomfort.
Yeah, and there's a lot at the moment in the sort of more popular literature, things like the comfort crisis, and
yes.
My friend Paul Taylor in Australia has just published a book called Death by Comfort. And I'm supposed to be writing one at the moment. I'm on study leave that I haven't actually been doing. Or might have to not tell AUT about that. But the book I wanted to write was originally going to be called Comfortably Numb, sort of because I'm a Pink Floyd fan, and it was around mental health and the fact we're not getting enough stress.
Yeah.
I probably want to call that now choose your hard.
Yes.
And the sort of idea of a new view of medicine that I think you call hormetic medicine.
Yeah.
Which is the idea that stress, whether it be lack of nutrient stress or exercise stress or psychological stress, is essential for health. This is the thing that confers health because it allows what we are, an adaptive system, to experience discomfort and then respond by building up stronger. This is what cold water immersion does. This is what sauna does through different mechanisms and myokines and brown fat and these types of things. This is what exercise does through other routes. This is what controlled psychological stress does, and we mistake that for chronic uncontrollable stress, which of course has it's like going for a 100-mile run with no training. I mean, what's that going to do? It's going to end badly, right? So I guess we can think about that. A view of medicine which takes into account of building up us, the human, the terrain to be more robust.
Yeah.
Another book I've been reading's on that, the coddling of the American mind.
Rob Lustig?
No, it's actually, I can't remember the authors, but it's an interesting book. It's just going, this psychological distress issue that we've seen, and in New Zealand we've seen this as well, right? So we had 5% of people having, on this K10 measure of psychological distress at any one time, and then that doubled over 10 years to 10%.
Yeah.
In the next 10 years to 2020, it doubled to 20% of us at any one time have psychological distress. And who knows what that is post-COVID. And you're like, well, is there more stress out there, or are we less robust at handling stress? And I think both, there's maybe, depending on the person, both are true.
Yeah.
But there's certainly a factor we're not talking about. Why are we, and the sort of prevention is cure and mental health and physical health, that we tend towards robustness if we're exposed to stress.
Yeah.
And that Nassim Taleb's book, Anti-Fragile, is about that. He had to invent a word.
Yeah.
To say this is what biological systems, including humans, are designed for, right? Stress, they're not just resilient, they don't just build back to where they were, they build back stronger. And I just think we're completely missing that in modern medicine.
Well, it's interesting if we talk about psychological distress and mental health, because obviously the government, not just this government, but other governments have, put a lot of money into dealing or solving mental health issues in New Zealand, but it's all on the treatment side of things. It's all counselling, it's all, and I'm not suggesting that this stuff isn't worthwhile and isn't necessary, but like most things in public health, it's not at that sort of, like the ideas that you're talking about, becoming more resilient and being able to deal with stress through the types of things that you just mentioned, never gets a look in, basically.
Well, I mean, I think about it like this, right? You imagine you've got a bunch of 12-year-olds and you go, hey, kids, we're going to send you running around this cross-country course that goes over this hill, around this hillside, down this rocky area and back. And they'll come back with cut feet.
Yeah.
Because it turns out there's glass on the course. And actually, some of the rocky areas, they just never wear bare feet, so they're not used to that. And then you go, well, the only solution for this is to keep running them around that course, but we need more doctors and nurses at the end with stitching up equipment and things to fix their bloodied feet.
Yeah.
I mean, it would make no sense. It's just, we'll keep sending them around the course, but, we won't clear up the grass and we'll never put them in bare feet any other time. So their feet are soft and prone to cuts, and the hazards we won't remove.
That's such a good analogy.
I mean, you wouldn't do that. I mean, no. Okay, we just need more people to fix up the cuts.
Yeah.
I mean, no, it's fundamentally stupid. But that's what we're doing in mental health.
Yeah.
We remove obstacles so people can't be robust.
Yeah.
And we lift hazards.
Yeah.
Things that are traumatic and other things on the course basically, and we don't. But then we just need more psychologists and psychiatrists at the end to talk about it. Like, I mean, absolutely nonsensical stuff.
Yeah. However, one thing I know that you're doing with Precure is you've worked with other experts as well to develop a course to help coach people, right?
Yeah. Well, I've sort of felt that there's. I've been thinking a lot about mental health recently, but I think this applies to metabolic health and overall health as well. But I think there's sort of three pillars that we completely miss in medicine. The first is that prevention is cure. Yeah. And so we can build robustness through exposure to stress.
Yeah.
And things that help us recover from stress, for diet, physical activity, sleep, friends. Fitness is medicine, friends are medicine, food is medicine, sleep's medicine, all those things. So, and you look at the investment in public health and public mental health and those things, it's nothing.
Yeah.
So that major pillar doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
So we're not even attenuating the robustness of the species. And then the second thing is, if we've got a workforce that can even attend to those things, use those things both in a preventive manner and a therapeutic manner, people already have those issues. And the answer is no, we don't even train any of that stuff. It's sort of behavioural change and it's a health coaching model where it becomes very much about working on people's agenda and helping them to the solution, but with your own knowledge, and that's why we've sort of really worked hard with health coaching and now mental health coaching. I mean, we'll never train enough psychologists or psychiatrists. It takes years to train them.
Yeah.
And we're New Zealand, as an example, we have 1,300 active registered clinical psychologists who are involved in treatment.
Yeah.
And that treatment gap, we would need 10 times that amount.
Yeah.
There's no chance. So we have to do is think differently there.
Yeah.
And then the third thing that I think we could do better in both metabolic health and mental health is compassionate care in the community. I mean, the mental health things that I've been involved with through young people I know, you're not ringing the police on your son or your daughter or your mum or your friends to help solve this problem. I mean, first of all, the police aren't trained for it. They're not doing their normal duties of helping with crime. And it's just the wrong place. Why we're like at least a formerly rich country. Why can't we actually prioritize these sorts of things? I mean, the well-being of particularly our young people is why is that not a priority?
And Grant, I can't think of any country where this stuff is prioritised in the way that you're discussing.
No,
I didn't think so.
No. I guess the only thing is you look at where the best outcomes are, and they're not very good outcomes. Something like Sweden.
Yeah.
And I think the only probable reason for that is that they just allocate more percentage of their health budget to at least mental health in this case, and some of more. There is at least an allocation to prevention. Yeah. We just don't do that. I mean, honestly, what we call prevention is things like bowel cancer screening and skin cancer screening and breast cancer screening, and those prevent bad outcomes. But it's not preventing disease, you're detecting disease. Yeah. It's not prevention. Yeah. It's early detection. Yeah. So, I mean, it's completely the wrong word. I'm not decrying the importance of that. I'm not really an expert on those things, but, it's not prevention. No,
I appreciate. And just FYI, the coddling of the American mind, Jeff Lukanoff and Jonathan Haidt.
Yeah, and actually you can also just, if you don't want to buy the book, there's some great YouTube interviews on there, and sort of we're having a discussion about it yesterday. Part of the problem with these books is you go, oh, that's really interesting. Should I buy it? Or should I just go and listen to a podcast with the authors? And I can do that right now for free and actually often get more insight. Yeah. And so, you can just do that. But the coddling of the American mind's a really interesting idea. And it's not just about America, although America arguably is, I don't know about if it's possible for the species to devolve.
But are you suggesting that
I don't know.
There was?
I don't know, I'm just putting it out there. But you walk around any of these resort areas, and if they're not an athlete, it's not pretty.
Well, I tell you what, Grant, what we're describing with those books that we acquire yet do not read, they might sit beside our bed. There's a word for that, Japanese word called sundoku, starting with a T.
Okay, and what does that mean?
It means that it's acquiring reading materials but letting them pile up in one's home without reading them. Which is exactly what we described.
Oh my goodness.
Hey, now I do want to talk to you about Matt Kerr, your athlete, but before I do, you highlighted something, or you mentioned something which I just want to circle back to, which is you noted a change in your incidental activity, which contributed to your weight gain earlier this year. And the reason why I want to sort of circle back on that is because I think this is an area which a lot of people aren't even cognizant of. Like they know that they're now working from home as opposed to working at work, or they're having this sort of shift there, but they've gained weight and they can't quite figure out why. It's so many people don't appreciate that, though that minor change in incidental activity actually makes a big difference over a length of time.
Yeah, so when I've normally been living in Auckland, which I'm not at the moment, then I would accumulate a lot of activity because I've set up my life that I have to bike to and from work. There's half an hour each way. Luckily, where my research centre is, it's a high-performance sports facility. There's like 3 swimming pools, a track, a gym that I get a free membership to, and all this stuff. So I actually end up just doing stuff. Yeah. There's other events on. I don't know. I just set it up. I just like to do it that way, and it works pretty well. And I think the thing in the keto and the low carb community, which I've been quite a big part of, they tend to dismiss the value of activity and exercise. It's like, it's not about the calories, and it's about managing the macros. And there might be some truth to that, depending on how insulin resistant you are. But actually, there's an energy output as well. And I've tended to be very active and have a reasonably high input as well. And I like living that life. But to change one and the other both at the same time seems to be something that's beyond my ability sometimes. So sort of not saying I'm trying to exercise my way into shape, but I think it's in my lifestyle that in and out demand is something that people do need to think about, because eventually calories do count.
Yeah, and I think over the last couple of years, I've been more interested in the physique science space and following people who, Eric Helms. And,
those are gurus, those guys. Absolute gurus.
Yeah, because they are, right? Because they've got it down to a fine art in terms of the amount of sort of calories you need to expend and take in and things like that, which is well beyond what the average person needs to worry about. But it does make you more aware that actually, if you do go from that active lifestyle to sort of doing 2,000 steps a day because your office and home are now one, that's going to account for change, even if you haven't changed your food intake, and particularly if you haven't.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And it's really interesting with these aesthetic sports. I mean, as a triathlete enthusiast, coach, former pro triathlete, and someone who's really into the endurance community, you look at aesthetic sports and you just turn your nose up and go, what the hell are these idiots on about? Like, you people for real. But actually, if you want to find out from the edge about how nutrition affects metabolism and weight and fat, then these guys are next level, because they live this stuff. And like anyone, they do stuff like us in the endurance community. We do stuff that no other human would do because they think it's stupid. And they may be right. But the same applies to the aesthetic sport community. They do things that they just push the limits. And this is really the beauty of science in this area. I think you can do animal models and all this sort of stuff, but there's no substitute for humans work. And these athlete models, aesthetic sports or endurance sports, whatever it is, they'll do stuff that other humans won't do, and you learn so much. I completely agree. So, Grant, if we shift gears to Matt Kerr, because I'm really interested, and I was chatting to Rob before Rob and I recorded our wearables podcast. We ended that podcast talking about the idea of being fat adapted as a way to sort of change your glucose utilization in hot environments. We sort of ended our talk on that, and I said to Rob, I'm definitely wanting to speak to Grant about Matt and the approach that you've taken with him, because you've been coaching him for a couple of years now, right? Yeah, so this guy, Matt Kerr, was a CrossFit athlete. And I only met him through the local surf club, and he was sort of helping coach my two boys through this surf club training camps and stuff they would go on. And it was sort of CrossFit orientated, which annoyed me a bit for a start. But I sort of saw potential in him. He's a very focused sort of young guy. His logistics, and he just doesn't leave stones unturned. And triathlon really is a logistics sport. There's a lot to organise and many layers to get right. And it's not so much about toughing it out as getting everything is good, or in the sort of glass half empty, making the least amount of screw-ups as possible. And so I sort of said, why don't you have a go at this sport? And in fact, I've got all this equipment because I'm not really doing this stuff anymore. I'll give you like these couple of carbon bikes. I've got a trainer. I just gave him all my stuff.
Amazing.
So
was he looking to do something different?
Just looking to do something different. And he's already a good swimmer. Run a little bit. I've never ridden a bike before. It was 4 years ago, and so sort of. And he was just munching down the carbs. And he did 70.3 Taupo, did it right. First race, and he was going to go through into the Ironman in New Zealand. So the 70.3 is in early December, and the Ironman's in March, sort of 3 months later. And I was like, hey, could I convince you to come up to the lab and we'll do some metabolic testing on you? And it's like, okay. So got him up there, and the people don't know, you get you on I think we did it on the bike actually. put you through, put the power up and up and up until you can't, it's a VO2 max test, so it's maxing you out, and you've got the respiratory exchange equipment over your nose and mouth, and you're breathing in and out, and it gives you all those sort of figures about, ventilatory thresholds and lactate thresholds and all that stuff, and your VO2 max, all very interesting, but superficially useful. But what I think was the most interesting thing is the respiratory exchange ratio, which gives you amount of fat that they can burn, amount of carbohydrate they burn at various exercise intensities. And so you end up with a thing called fat max. It's a maximum amount of fat you can oxidize.
Yeah.
And so for him at that point, in the sport for 6 months, done a 70.3 reasonably, like I'm third in his age group or something.
Yeah.
He was burning 0.51 grams a minute of fat.
So how does that compare to your general athlete and then potentially someone who is well fat adapted?
That's about what most people would do. And so when you work that out, you're probably providing about 400 calories an hour at your best from fat.
Yeah.
And when you consider that you're racing at about 1,200 calories an hour, you've got to find the other 800 from somewhere else, and the only other somewhere else is glucose.
Yeah.
And so the trouble with that, and he could do that at 165 watts, which is also not very much power, so he'd be going pretty slow.
Yeah.
At more like what he would be racing at that stage, which was about 240 watts, his fat oxidation had plummeted even further, so he was almost exclusively burning carbohydrates. So over 4 hours with some of the 70.3 distance, with a bit of pre-carbohydrate loading, solid consumption of carbohydrates through the event, you can just get there without running out of muscle and liver glycogen.
Yeah.
And you can work this all out on a spreadsheet. It's pretty easy. You don't have to be any sort of mathematician to just work it out.
Yeah.
But if you extrapolate that to the sort of 9 or probably 10 hours it was going to take him for the Ironman, you could see what I think you observe on the race course on the day, that he would run out of glycogen before the end of the bike, no matter how much he ate.
Yeah.
And it basically would have bonked, hit the wall, or in more technical terms, run out of liver and muscle glycogen. He's just going to shovel home in pain. And that's 90% of the field in these Ironman events.
Yeah.
And so the question is, can you change fuel utilization to a way that preserves glycogen? And I think, you try and look at different sports, at least for these ultra endurance ones like Ironman. Mm-hmm. To me, the major limiting factor is glycogen availability. Yeah. You can only eat it at a certain rate. Yeah. And you've only got a small reservoir to start with. Yeah. So I just put him on a keto diet for the couple of weeks until Christmas. Yeah. He suffered badly. In fact, he set his kitchen on fire.
Oh, Jesus.
Because he was, just not functioning. Yeah. But then he came right, and we started to do some fasted zone 2 riding and running. So a long ride each week, which we started just a couple of hours. Yeah. And built up to 5 or 6 hours. In the long run, which started at maybe an hour and ended up at 2.5 hours. Yeah,
where he was able to do it without taking on board fuel.
Yeah, we just fasted, no breakfast, and just have some electrolyte through it, but without calories. Yeah. And that's a tough ask. And you're trying to do zone 2 training, so you're trying to keep his heart rate down in that easy zone 2. And then I measured him just before the race again, and he had moved his fat oxidation from 0.52, did I say, grams per minute to 1.1 grams a minute. Nice. And he was now doing this at 265 watts rather than 165.
Oh, wow.
Which is about what he's going to race at. So,
So what year was this? Was this 2020 at the time?
It's like 2019.
Okay, yep, cool.
Yeah. And, and then he was actually able to do a really good Ironman. He never bonked. Did 9:22 for his first race, which is a great result.
Yeah. Would that have won the age group race for him?
It won his. No, he didn't win the age group race overall.
Yeah. But he won his.
No, I don't even think he did that. Didn't
he?
No.
Yeah.
No, he didn't.
Yeah.
But he did pretty well.
Yeah.
And his run wasn't fast. He was like 3:17 or something, and his bike was solid, and probably his biking equipment. Dan Plews gave us a well, we got a bike off him, we bought off him, but actually it turns out, I think Dan agreed, actually it wasn't a very good bike at the end of the day.
Maybe Dan was protecting his own age group.
Yeah,
race.
no, I know Dan had finished by then, so because Dan Plews, people don't know, had just become the overall age group world champion at Kona in 2018.
That's
so
right.
So sort of retired pretty much straight after that.
Yeah.
And so was getting rid of some of that equipment, so we got that off him. But anyway, what was interesting over the next couple of years, we just continue with that approach, as that being the major limiting factor. So we continue to work on fat oxidation as our priority.
Yeah.
And zone 2 training, and we're a big fan of Phil Maffetone's method and all that sort of low stress stuff.
Yeah. Do you guys work on the sort of 80-20 type approach?
It'd be something like that.
Yeah.
And sometimes even more than that, right? So more of zone 2 than that. But yeah, really a view that if you're oxidizing fat as a primary fuel source, you can do that fasted. That's great. It's low stress for reactant oxygen species and inflammation, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And when you do the 20%, then we sort of talk about a right time, right fuel.
Yeah.
And so we're not anti-carbohydrate here by any means. So for those 20% of the work that we're working at a higher intensity, we'd be having carbs either during the session or pre-session.
Yeah.
To fuel those sort of glycolytic pathways.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think over that 2-year period, I think we ended up moving him to his maximum fat oxidation was now 1.8 grams per minute.
Awesome.
And that was at 300 watts.
Yeah, amazing.
And that's just next level, right? And so actually, if riding at 300 watts, which is extremely fast, that's as good as some of the better pros.
Yeah.
He's still burning a lot of fat.
Yeah.
And he doesn't even have to eat the full amount of carbohydrate to make the event at that speed.
So can you do the math for us on that, just because it's not my strong, and it's okay.
I think it's something like getting 950 calories an hour from fat at
amazing.
Race pace.
Yeah.
And if he's racing at 1,300, there's a gap there still.
Yeah.
But actually, he's got some of that already inside him, and as long as he's taking some extra carbs, he's probably going to be fine.
So what kind of carbohydrate intake would he have then? What do you look to replace?
Like about 30-40 grams an hour.
Yeah, so about 120 calories.
Yeah,
120
it's
to
not
160,
heaps, but then you start to shovel in a lot more, then you get other risks and
the GI stuff that we were just listening to.
Yeah, I think that might be a bit overplayed, but who wants to go down? If you're going to run into that problem,
Well, that sounds a lot like Zach Bitter, actually, and I know that Matt was just on Zach's podcast a few weeks ago, Human Performance Outliers.
Yeah.
Because Zach has figured out that with his events, and he's running, high intensity, 12 hours. He's settled on about that 40 grams of carbs an hour, I think.
And he just seems quite comfortable at that. He never bonks, so it's like... and I suppose also the other thing is that the further you get into the run, probably emptying and absorption, I don't know how you study this particularly, but I assume it slows down.
Compromised day. Just the intensity. So when the intensity ramps up from fatigue, even if the intensity is the same, your fatigue is going to play a real factor in your gut function, ability to take stuff on. Yeah. Well, that's awesome.
So we've been working with Matt on that, and I suppose in the last couple of years he's got really quite good. So basically every event he's gone and he's broken the age group course record by a bit. He did 8:27, I think, in Ironman New Zealand, which is pretty quick for an age group athlete.
Amazing.
He won the overall age group race at Ironman Triathlon World Championships earlier this year in Utah.
Yeah.
He's preparing for Kona now. There's other limiting factors in Kona.
Yeah.
So, glycogen availability would be one thing, and it will affect people.
Yeah.
You made some interesting comments before about the heat, alluding to the heat.
Yeah.
That perhaps you burn more carbohydrate in hotter weather.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to investigate that, and I talked to Dr. Ed Mulder, who's a lecturer at AET who specialises in that area, and they've got quite good data on that. And they're saying, you do, for the same output in the heat versus the cool, you burn more carbohydrate.
Yeah.
But for the same effective load, which I guess if you measure it by heart rate, then there's no difference, because it just requires more work in the heat to produce the same result.
So if it's the same effective workload, that therefore means that you'd probably have to drop that workload.
Yeah, and whether people are prepared to do that, and something like Hawaii is another thing, and so maybe the demand is even more so.
Yeah, because that's what Rob talked about as well with regards to figuring out power output at a given heart rate, and then that power would just have to be a little bit lower for most athletes.
Yeah, the thing is with Hawaii though, it also depends. Like training is a little bit different than the racing, and the conditions might vary, and also the thing is how effectively you can hydrate, particularly on the bike, is a massive factor.
Yeah.
And so I think we've been pretty careful about that in leading up to this, but Matt's got quite a high sweat rate, which worries me a little bit. But I think the maximum you can get down is a couple of bottles an hour.
Yeah.
But I think that's 2/3 of the hydration and cooling, but the other third that's available in this race is to get cold water and get it on your head, down your front.
Yeah.
While you're riding.
Yeah.
And then we've been experimenting quite a lot with ice in the hands while you're running as a cooling mechanism. That's the other layer in this event is you sort of look at limiting factors. I think for a normal temperate ultra endurance race, glycogen availability is a thing. For Kona, that's a factor, but actually it's hydration and cooling. And those are potentially life-threatening.
And where are you on that sodium front? Because you and I sort of chatted about that, because I love the Element. Did you try that Element, by the way?
I haven't tried it yet, but I should have. Well, maybe I wouldn't have got dropped. That's an interesting one, because it's got about 1 gram of sodium in a sachet, which is much higher than other products, which most of the other ones you can buy off the shelf tend to be about 250 milligrams for a serve. Which means that's about what you'll get down in an hour. We did quite a lot of testing with Matt around sweat rates and sodium loss, and they estimate his, when he's heat adapted, his sodium loss to be around 1 gram an hour.
It's significant.
And I think actually what we had noticed is in a couple of races, I mean, he still won them, but mainly because he was so far ahead, but he was getting to the sort of 26, 28K mark in the run, and he was just getting these wild whole body cramps, like his muscles in his little finger through to his forearms, through to the actual big muscles like the quads and the hammies were just fully cramping, and he had to sort of stagger home 10 steps at a time, which is pretty ugly. And I sort of quite a lot of advice around that, and a lot of the advice is like, oh no, this is fatigue related, electrolytes and sodium got nothing to do with it. And then I'm going, well, if you're losing 1 gram of sodium an hour in your sweat, and you're out there 8 hours, surely that's going to end badly. And so we've just went and bought these salt tablets off Amazon. You buy 1,000 of them for $30 or something.
Nice.
1 gram salt tablets. And just using those. And they've been effective so far, but I'll let you know after the weekend as well.
Because when we chatted, I was chatting to you about how with my clients who can't the Element's not cheap. And also it's difficult to get a hold of some, it can take weeks to get to New Zealand, for example. But having putting like half a teaspoon of salt in a litre of water, which is essentially the same thing, about 1 gram of sodium, just
correct.
over 1 gram of sodium.
Is that what it works out to be, about half a teaspoon of salt?
Because it's 2.4 grams of sodium is in a teaspoon. So you could just add that to your little tab or just under, and then that would probably equate.
And the other thing that I used to do when I was an athlete, I got this idea off Mark Allen at the time, who was a pro racing rider, who was the 6 or 7 time Ironman world champion. He'd get these same salt tablets, and they're not capsules, they're like little chelated, those sort of pills. And you can suck them and they taste salty.
Oh, I like that.
Which is interesting. You put them in your mouth, at the start of the Ironman, actually they taste disgusting, you sort of spit them out. But you get 4 or 5 hours into it and you put these things in your mouth, you're like, yum. and you suck them until they taste salty and you spit them out. Matt doesn't do that, he just takes them. But, that's another approach. Sort of go with homeostasis by taste.
I like that, Grant. And you talked, the whole cramping thing is interesting, and you talked to me about that on our run yesterday, actually, about the difference between it being a neuromuscular issue and actually something else. Can you just sort of talk through that?
I think there's a fatigue-related cramp. I'm absolutely sure of that. I mean, the most obvious example to me is, as an irregular but keen swimmer, who has been a reasonably good swimmer, so I can do all my flip turns and, really push off strongly with my feet and get into that hyperextended position.
Yeah.
I just get to about 1.5 k's of swimming and I get these ridiculous plantar fasciitis foot cramps.
Yeah.
And it's fatigue related.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. So, no amount of sodium is going to help that.
Yeah.
But I think that's very different from the sort of cramps that we've been seeing with this, which are, full body type things that seem to be electrolyte replacement. I think the trouble is you look at the literature on cramping, which I have done, and it's actually pretty pathetic. And I mean, I'm not saying it's pathetic because the research is pathetic. It's just like, how do you study this intermittent, random phenomena that is actually pretty debilitating? You can't do studies where you sort of induce it very easily.
Yeah.
If you do, is it ethical? So, I think the field suffers from that probably.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And finally, Grant, can I just ask you about Matt's sort of training nutrition outside of the sort of strategic carbohydrate? What other things does he
I think it's really I can tell you quite a lot about it. So I've been living with for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So a lot of fasted training, just because it's first thing in the morning, have a coffee.
Yeah.
So a typical day is I wake up about 5:30. We just have a chat and a coffee. We have some maybe cream in his coffee. That's the only calories.
Yeah.
And we get out and train.
Yeah.
I think probably most of those earlier sessions are going to be zone 2 type training. So they just happen.
Yeah.
Plenty of fluids, some electrolyte, sodium. Get back. He'd probably immediately smash I don't know, these sort of blueberry type smoothies seems what he has, but it's probably what I've seen him take is like almond milk, some blueberries, some protein powder, a bit of ice, and just get some calories in, with a few carbs, but protein and a bit of fat as well, and just immediately have that. And then when he feels like eating, he'd probably make some sort of omelette type thing with heaps of veg and plenty of eggs and cheese and that stuff. Then it might move into lunch, and that would typically just be leftovers from the night before, which will be some sort of protein and veg. Yeah. And they might go for an afternoon session. There might be some carbs added to that.
Is that generally the higher intensity?
Yeah, I think that probably. I sort of feel you're better prepared for that at that time of the day, right?
Yeah.
If you're doing that sort of work, and then just going to dinner, which would be, I don't know, just protein of some description, whether it's meat, fish, chicken, curry, cauli rice, heaps and heaps of veggies.
Yeah.
I mean, I think actually he'd make the food and I'd be eating it in the same proportion as him, which is ridiculous. Nonetheless. And then he would probably have another, seemingly have that dinner.
Yeah.
And that would turn into a second dinner, I don't know, like of the leftovers.
Yeah.
Because the calorie intake is so high. So, I mean, it's just a whole food
diet.
And there's no magic to that, really.
Yeah.
There's not too many pills or potions and that sort of thing. So.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah. Sweet, Grant. Well, outside of that, of course, my original plan was to talk to you about sort of the conference curriculum and what we're learning and what we're not learning here, but probably not a lot to discuss on that front.
No, I haven't really gone except for the free breakfast.
Exactly, and then the morning teas.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you probably we're not missing too much. I mean, it's enjoyable. I enjoy the sort of the environment and sitting in a conference and hearing people talk. You get a couple of gems, but not too different from last year, or 2 years ago when I was last year.
And the other thing that we've been discussing, just to circle a little bit back to what we originally said with this choose your hard thing. I actually thought this when I was about 20. I was going, look, if you're going to have a low performance life, it seems still to be quite a lot of work. Like you have to go to work and work hard, and generally you're doing it on someone else's terms.
Yes. And
people seem less happy with that. And a high performance life, you generally get better pay. You seem to be able to do it on your own terms and everything. The kicker is, of course, you have to do more work right at the start.
Yeah.
But on balance, they're probably at least about the same amount of work, and the low performance one might even be more work.
Yes.
And so my rationale at that point was, on the basis of pure laziness, might as well choose the high performance life.
Yeah.
And I reckon there's still something in that. I don't know. So just putting that out there, like that there's difficulty in everything in life.
Yeah.
And it's not a course to shy away from. It's actually good fun. But you choose which ones do you want to be hard.
Yeah.
If you're lucky enough to have the environment, you've got those choices. Choose your hard. That's my one for the day, even if it's on the basis of pure laziness.
I love that, Grant. And I was thinking about that as I was running along in my last 2 kilometres, thinking, this is hard work. And I'm like, what would be hard work anyway?
Yeah.
And how great it is that it's hard work in Hawaii, called to 7 a.m, living my best life, running intervals along Ali Drive.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome. Cool, Grant. Thanks for that.
Thank you.